Call this meeting to order. Welcome back, colleagues. Great to see you all. Hope you had a great break in your ridings. This is meeting number 36 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. It doesn't seem like we've spent that much time because it's always lovely to be with all of you. I'm going to start with a few reminders. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, and just so you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Of course, no screenshots are permitted. And please be in mind of the Board of Internal Economy's guidelines for mask, youth, and health protocol. So, colleagues, we know why we're here today. Today is clause by clause on Bill C-234. And as the name indicates, this is an examination of all the clauses in the order in which they appear in the bill. I will call each clause successively, and each clause is subject to debate and a vote. If there are amendments to the clause in question, I will recognize the member proposing it who may explain it. The amendment will then be open for debate. When no further members wish to intervene, the amendment will be voted on. Amendments will be considered in the order in which they appear in the package, so each member, you should have received that, or you would have received that over the past week. If there are amendments that are consequential to each other, they will be voted on together. Let me see. Amendments have been given a number in the top right corner to indicate which party submitted them. There's no need for a seconder to move an amendment. Once moved, you will need unanimous consent to withdraw it. Once every clause has been voted on, the committee will vote on the title and the bill itself. And in order to reprint the bill, may be required. If amendments are adopted so that the House has a proper copy for use at report stage. Finally, the committee will have to order the chair to report the bill back to the House. That report contains only the text of any adopted amendments as well as an indication of any deleted clauses. So I think that covers it. A few more reminders just for your benefit. We're going to be asking for witness lists for the food price study by November 16th at noon. I know in speaking to folks during the last meeting that we had prior to the break, we would ask you to get prepared on that, so that should come as no surprise. If you're not able to have them right in on the 16th, this committee does generally work pretty well by consensus, but don't expect to have your witnesses up for the first couple meetings, of course, if you don't have us witnesses that we can work with. And the global food security deadline for recommendations. I've just seen this, but we're going to be asking for recommendations by November 21st at noon. So that the analysts can start to bring together that report accordingly. Anything else, Madam Clerk, that I may have missed? Okay, so we'll turn now to the actual amendments. Let me find my own package here so I can follow along with you. So we'll get started on the package. I have first Liberal number 1. And that's Mr. Turnbull. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Turnbull, to introduce your proposed amendment.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and great to be here and considering this bill again. The amendment that I've proposed here, Lib 1, is to remove lines 4 to 10. And that is to basically remove property that enables barn heating as an eligible piece of farming machinery from this bill. And, we had heard that grain drying is one of the arguments that's been made over and over again is that in terms of technology, renewable energy, that there aren't commercially viable solutions for grain drying. Well, I think what we did here was that there are tools for heating and cooling of barns and or greenhouses, and I think that that's part of the rationale why this should be removed. We also know that things that farmers can do is insulate their barns, which is a possibility for reducing their carbon footprint, and would also, in some senses, decrease their costs. So I think And we know, I mean, barns across Alberta, for example, have little or no insulation and depends almost solely on body heat from livestock. So I think we heard this in some of the testimony. So it is possible to retrofit barns and greenhouses. It is possible to use solar, geothermal, air source heat pumps. It is possible currently to insulate. The other part of this, which I think I should point out to members, is that based on the current scope in the wording, that it would be too broad, because in fact, you can't really separate natural gas or propane usage from any of the other buildings on farm. Very difficult to do that when they're piped in with one pipe. So the building's consumption would be very hard to figure out in relation to the other buildings on farm. And certainly, I don't think what's being intended here is to give the homes and or other buildings on farm that are not for livestock an exemption. So I think, those are, I think some of the arguments that and rationale that I'm providing today. There certainly are commercially viable alternatives for heating and cooling of barns and greenhouses. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Ms. Taylor-Roy, I saw your hand first, and then I have Mr. Barlow, so we'll proceed in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Turnbull, for introducing that amendment, which I support. And I think you've given, the reason why it's good. We know that our farmers are with us on trying to reduce their carbon footprint and doing everything they can. And we also know that the price on pollution was put in place to give a price signal to make sure that the cost of the pollution is incorporated when people are making decisions about how best to move forward. And I think obviously insulating barns becomes a good investment choice when the cost of pollution is reflected in the cost of heating those barns. So I think it does give the right incentive there. And I agree, the grain drying is different. We've heard from farmers there aren't alternatives, but we have heard that there are alternatives on the heating side. The only thing I wanted to do was support, but also to just amend Mr. Turnbull's amendment to just include lines 16 to 19 as well, because if lines 4 to 9 are deleted, then lines 16 to 19 should also be deleted because it's referring to the same issue. Thank you.
Okay, so colleagues, we have an amendment to the provisions that Mr. Lobb has in his proposed bill C-234 from Mr. Turnbull. We now have a sub-amendment to that amendment from Ms. Taylor-Roy. Mr. Barlow, I saw your hand. I'll let you comment on either one of those elements.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And just quickly, I would say I'm not sure what testimony Mr. Turnbull was listening to when he says barns aren't insulated and heat pumps and biomass are commercially and economically viable at this time. But, I would just move that we come to a vote on the amendment and the proposed amendment from Ms. Taylor-Roy. I think the testimony was pretty clear on this.
So certainly my ruling as a chair, Mr. Barlow, of course, is that if someone wants to debate and continue to do this, they're welcome to. So I will look to my colleagues both on the screen or in this room if there's any further debate on both the sub-amendment that was proposed by Ms. Taylor-Roy and the original amendment from Mr. Turnbull. Any further debate or discussion? Oh, just one sec. Okay. Seeing no other questions, just one sec. Okay. Shall we call for a vote then on the sub-amendment? Would you like a recorded vote, or can it carry on division, or be defeated on division? I look to my opposition. Why don't we just do a vote to make it nice and simple for everyone? Over to you, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Kellaway?
Yes.
Mr. Louis,
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
In favor?
Mr. Turnbull,
In favor?
Ms. Valdez,
In favor.
Mr. Barlow,
Opposed.
Mr. LaHoo,
Contre.
Ms. Rude,
Opposed.
Mr. Steinley,
No.
Monsieur Perron,
Contre.
Mr. McGregor.
No.
Six nays, six non, 5 yeas, 5 oui.
Okay. So the sub-amendment is defeated. We'll now proceed to a vote on the original amendment, if that's all right, Madam Clerk, with you, of Mr. Turnbull's.
Mr. Kellaway,
In favor?
Mr. Louis,
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
In favor?
Mr. Turnbull,
In favor?
Ms. Valdez,
In favor.
Mr. Barlow,
Opposed.
Mr. LaHoo,
Contre.
Ms. Root,
Opposed.
Mr. Steinley,
No.
Monsieur Perron,
Contre.
Against.
No.
Six nays, 5 non, 5 yeas, 5 oui.
Okay, so that amendment is defeated as well. We'll proceed to clause number 2. This is being proposed as NDP number 1. Mr. McGregor, I'll leave the floor to you to discuss your proposed amendment.
Thank you, Chair. So I hope the wording of this amendment is a middle ground. I don't quite agree with the approach that was taken with the previous amendment, but I do take the point that the wording of C234 as currently worded is too broad. And in fact, when I was speaking with legislative drafters, they did confirm that as C234 is currently written, it could mean any building on a property. Since the subject nature of this bill is dealing with agriculture and agriculturally related buildings, I thought it prudent to narrow the scope of the wording so that we are specifying that this is going to a structure that is specifically used for the raising or housing of livestock or for the growing of crops. We did hear a fair amount of testimony from various organizations involved in livestock, but we also did receive a helpful brief from the Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada. And, you know, in a previous life, I worked on the construction of a large commercial greenhouse. Many of them still do use gas-fired boilers. And we do want to see them transition, but, I mean, these are systems worth millions of dollars. It's not something that can happen overnight. So I think that if we change this to narrow the scope of this, and Mr. Barlow is going to have a sunset clause proposed afterwards, we are narrowing the scope, but we're also narrowing the time that this would be in effect. So there's not much more to say. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McGregor. Any conversation, any debate, discussion on the proposed amendment? Monsieur Perron.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. Just to recall that we had a lot of witnesses and studies that stressed the importance of having a temporary exemption for buildings as well. So the idea is to, if the idea is to have a balance, as Mr. McGregor says, I think that to avoid too broad an application of the law for this exemption, I think we have to include these other buildings until new technologies are available, because we have said that there are up-and-coming technologies for heating more so than for drying grain. And so I think that this is a very reasonable suggestion, and I support it.
Thank you, Mr. Perron. Ms. Taylor-Roy, I know you're participating virtually. The clerk has asked, just with the light behind you, it's a little bit difficult to pick you up if you were to speak. So if you're able to just bring a blind down or something to that effect, that would be wonderful, according to the clerk. Thank you very much, or maybe perhaps a different background. Colleagues, any further debate, discussion? If not, we'll call this to a vote. Madam Clerk, if you could help us.
Mr. Kellaway?
In favor?
Mr. Louis?
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy?
In favor.
Mr. Turnbull, I'm sorry.
In favor.
Ms. Valdez?
In favor.
Mr. Barlow?
In favor.
Mr. LaHoo?
Pour.
Ms. Root?
In favor.
Mr. Steinley? Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Monsieur Perron?
En faveur.
Mr. McGregor?
In favor.
All in favor to sans faveur.
Okay. Thank you very much, colleagues. We'll now move to the first of the Conservative Party, which is Mr. Barlow's proposed amendment. Mr. Barlow, you have the floor to explain and outline your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And certainly this amendment comes forward just certainly from the testimony we heard from many of the presenters who gave their time and talked about the impact the carbon tax is having on their operations, but also the confidence that they have that technology eventually will allow for a change in how they are heating their barns and drying their grain. So certainly in conversation with our colleagues, we felt the sunset clause was certainly something that we could support and would be an incentive for when the time comes when new technology is commercially as well as economically and regionally available, that we know our farmers are always going to embrace new innovation and new technology that makes them more sustainable, more economically and environmentally sustainable, I think are two important pillars. So we are proposing to amend the PMB to have a 10-year sunset clause as part of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. I open the floor to questions and comments from your colleagues. I do see Mr. Turnbull's hand.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks to Mr. Barlow for the explanation. I'm just wondering if we can get maybe an opinion from the legislative clerk on the interpretation of this. When we read CPC 1 and CPC 2 combined, it seemed like they might be having the opposite of the intended impact that Mr. Barlow articulated. And I just wanted to make sure that the legislative clerk was confident that the intent of Mr. Barlow's amendment was actually reflected in the effect that it would have.
We can certainly ask Mr. Mela if he'd like to comment or any other further clarification. That's why he's here today, to help us out, and we'll go as questions are required.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. It's usually not my place to talk about the content of the bill, but more procedural. But in this case, what the intent of Mr. Barlow is to have a sunset clause on his first amendment coming on in his second amendment. So the two amendments go together. So the first amendment would have the effect of reversing back in 10 years, or when the sunset clause comes into force, 10 years. And that's what the intent of the two amendments combined together, and they have to be voted on together.
I guess sorry, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to go to Mr. Barlow because he might have more of an explanation, and then we'll go back to you, of course, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And sorry, Ryan, I should have maybe gone to the next amendment, include that. So that next amendment is the order in council as part of that sunset clause. So at 10 years, when that sunset comes up, it goes to the order in council, debated within the House. At that time, or it can be repealed, and just that part of the PMB is taken out of the Price of Pollution Act because new technology is available. That's why they're kind of intertwined. Is you have the sunset clause, but also that second amendment, which is the order in council, that would allow that to be repealed if the government of the day decides that the technology is there, then that is no longer needed. If that clarifies a bit better.
So I kind of understand that. What I was worried about was that the way it's worded might actually have the opposite effect. In other words, that it wouldn't come into effect until 10 years from now, rather than, I think what you're intending is for the sunset clause to be for a 10-year period, that the amendment you're proposing essentially allow for that exemption for 10 years. It looked to me, and maybe I read it wrong, but I just wanted to be clear from the legislative clerk that subsection 4 on CPC 2, in terms of the interpretation of it, and in good faith here, I'm asking the question in order to make sure that you're not having an unintended consequence based on your amendment, because it's hard for me to vote on something unless I'm clear as to the legislative clerk's interpretation.
Is that this legislation, the PMB, will be in place for 10 years, reviewed at the end of that 10 years. If the technology is available, that order in council allows either the government of the day to repeal that or extend it if the technology is not there. So, yes, in good faith, that is our proposal.
Monsieur Perron, après ça, Monsieur McGregor.
Oui.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And I'd like to thank the clerk for his opinion. I think that as it's presented, I thought that CPC 1 was independent from CPC 2. And if I understood the clerk, we have to vote for both together. That's not the way the document was presented, because otherwise I would have provided amendments for CPC 1, because in CPC 1 I have some problems. I have the impression that we're removing a number of notions with regard to mentioning the grain dryer, and we define agricultural machine. There's a shortened definition, and it's less specific than in the NBT resolution. And then in 5, we add that you can add any other machinery set out in the regulations, and there's a mention of propane and gas in the exemptions as well.
I'm going to go to Mr. McGregor, and then we'll make sure that the legislative clerk has the opportunity to address some of these points. Mr. McGregor.
Yeah, I might be repeating a lot, but just for the clerk to consider, my understanding is CPC 1 is basically reverting the text of this bill back to what is in the parent statute, what is currently written. I'm seeing a head nod there, and that the sunset clause will come into effect in 10 years if no action is taken by the House or the Senate. So Parliament has an ability. The Governor and Council can propose it, but there's a role for Parliament, which I like to see here. So I'll leave it at that, because you now have similar questions from all of us.
So, Mr. Legislative Clerk, I think the question that I'm hearing from the folks is how that interconnected play works and why they have to be voted on together, because it seems as though, particularly Monsieur Perron, had ideas that they were separate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Monsieur Perron, Monsieur McGregor vient de l'expliquer exactement comme...
Mr. McGregor has just explained it the way I would have explained it. And I'm going to take an example. If you take Article 1 compared to paragraph 1.1 of CPC 1, you have the definition in B1, which is put into the law, the definition of agricultural machinery, and that would be removed. If we leave that, that means that Article 1 of the bill, B1, will no longer exist immediately. And what CPC 2 does, when you see 2.1, paragraph 1.1, that's what I'm referring to, will enter into force on the 10th anniversary. So rather than taking effect immediately, it will take effect in 10 years. And in 10 years, we will come back to the situation we have today, unless there is some intervention by the Parliament to extend or modify that provision. And this would be the case for the other parts of the bill as well. I understand then that adopting 1.1 in CPC 1 would broaden the scope of the bill exponentially. And that's what I understand from. I think that's a shame because that's not what we discussed during our study. We referred to a reasonable compromise with farmers that do not want to be affected in the short term because they have no alternatives. We talked about maintaining a price on pollution. So I'm a bit upset by this reading.
Carlo, and then I see Mr. McGregor so that we can try to clarify what the intent here is.
Yeah, I want to assure my colleague that there's no intent on, this amendment is in good faith from what we heard from our witnesses at testimony. We are in no way trying to expand the breadth of Mr. Lobb's PMB. Basically, I know it looks complicated. We were working with the legislative team to craft this. This is 100% meant to just be adding the sunset clause to the PMB that we heard from testimony and certainly in conversations with and listening to the questions from my colleagues during the testimony, was that this would be much more palatable with a sunset clause involved. And I know my colleagues had some questions around the part about this being debated at the House, but no amendments. The reason we did that was we basically wanted to do something that was already done, a precedent that was set, and we basically modeled this after C30, the Fair Access to Rail for Grain Farmers Act, C30. So we wanted to make sure this wasn't something new, that we were implementing something that we know fits the legislative framework. So I want to assure my colleague that in no way are we looking at this as an expansion of any way. Certainly, we're trying to do this in good faith. If there are some concerns, that the government can address that in the regs. But to Mr. Perron, in no way was that an intention of what we were trying to do. And if that is how he's interpreting it, I don't want to say we're interpreting this incorrectly. But, legalese is what it is, I guess, but that is certainly not the intention.
Mr. McGregor.
Yeah, and perhaps Mr. Perron I was a bit confused by the comment about this broadening it because, if CPC 1 passes along with CPC 2, we're essentially just going back to the way the Act is currently written. So I don't see how that's going to be broadening it. I know it's a confusing way. It took me a few times to read through it. It's more complex than what I had proposed for C206 in the previous Parliament. But to me, I'm confident, and I think the legislative clerk has nodded a few times, that if these two are passed, we're essentially just going to revert to how the statute is currently written.
Tant mieux.
Well, so much the better. If I didn't understand really at the beginning, but if the clerk could he reconfirm that if we vote for CPC 1 and CPC 2, that means that we are basically adopting C234, and in 10 years we'll come back to the text we're modifying now with all points without affecting the scope of the bill. He seems to be nodding. I have to be authorized to turn my microphone on. So I say yes, you're right.
Is there any further debate or conversation or questions or clarification? Mr. McGregor?
Well, I guess we need to deal with CPC 1 in turn before we go to CPC 2, and my comment is on CPC 2, so I'll save that.
The only other question that, just for the clarity, is when you do look at Liberal number 2, Mr. Turnbull's proposal, it does talk about, I think, what you would refer to, Mr. Turnbull, as a sunset clause of 8 years. My role is to be independent here, but I would ask the clerk, Is that something we have to discuss now? If we're to move on CPC 1 and 2, that would have consequential impact to Mr. Turnbull's proposed Liberal number 2 amendment, correct?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, indeed. If CPC 1 is adopted, Lib 2 cannot be moved because it covers the same thing a bit differently.
Okay. Mr. Turnbull, I see your hand, and colleagues, for your benefit, obviously because that has consequences, I'll leave the floor open to basically CPC 1, 2, or Liberal 2, because obviously there's an interconnected web there for any discussion so that can happen accordingly.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask the clerk as well to clarify whether this particular amendment that we're considering, CPC 1 and 2, would have the effect of expanding the eligible fuels beyond just propane. It seems to me that it may actually broaden slightly. Could you maybe speak to that, clerk, if possible?
I'll go to Mr. Barlow quickly for his intent, and then I'll go for our independent opinion as well.
Just to answer Mr. Turnbull, the other fuels are already exempt under the Price and Pollution Act, but in the previous bill. So all this is doing is adding propane and natural gas to those exemptions.
Yeah, there's not much to. Yeah, the bill just provide the two amendments just provide for a sunset clause. That's all. There is no expansion provided anywhere.
Any further conversation on any of the elements? Mr. McGregor, I know you wanted to speak to, I think, CPC 2, was it not? And as does Ms. Taylor-Roy, perhaps. So I'm going to go Mr. McGregor, Monsieur Parent, Ms. Taylor-Roy, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Chair. I think Mr. Parent raised this further, and I know Mr. Barlow modeled this after an existing statute. And I think it was subsection 3 that, the motion for the adoption of the resolution may be debated, but may not be amended. And I'm just, maybe I'll test the room as to whether we want to allow amendments to happen. Like, do we want to handcuff future parliamentarians in this regard? So it was along the lines of what Mr. Parent and Mr. Barlow had already discussed. I'm just opening that up for colleagues' consideration.
Monsieur Parent?
On the same point as Mr. McGregor, we discussed this earlier, and basically I have a problem with point 3 of CPC 2, where you see that la motion visant l'adoption de la résolution peut faire l'objet d'un débat dans les... A motion for the adoption of the resolution may be debated in both houses of Parliament, may not be amended, and cannot be amended. I think maybe we could put in a sub-amendment and to remove cannot be amended, because I don't want to tie the hands of Parliament in 2 years. I don't like to tie my hands or ask me to stop speaking. I don't want to do that for Parliament.
So we're clear, you are moving a sub-amendment. Just for clarity, I see Mr. McGregor's hand next and Mr. Barlow, and I'm going to just take one moment to refer to my legislative clerk here. Just one sec.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to do it in English, and I will redo it in French afterwards. CPC1 and CPC2 go together. So proposing an amendment to CPC2 at this time is not possible because CPC2 is not open for discussion. It's open for discussion, but it's not open to be voted on. So the problem is, if you want to separate CPC1 and CPC2, you may risk to run into troubles. Trouble being, you may adopt CPC1, which has for effect to remove basically the effect of what's in the bill. And then you go to CPC2, the effect of which would be to postpone that for 10 years. If you don't adopt it, because sub-amendments were made and at the end of the day, parliamentarians don't like the end result and don't adopt CPC2, you end up with an empty bill. So it's just a situation that's a bit awkward, but it's a situation that indeed exists. So I just wanted to point out the risk of separating the two of them.
So, Mr. Perron, you've certainly signaled your intent when we get to that point. Do you have anything further to say before I go to Mr. McGregor?
Yes. For me, the important thing, and I think we agree on this, that this is shared by many of the members. I think we want to remove, but may not be amended, and whether it's no matter when, whether it's now or a little bit later, or that's something I'll leave to others. But I think the important thing is that we cannot have that remain.
I apologize, Ms. Taylor-Roy. I forgot that your hand was up, so it'll actually be Ms. Taylor-Roy, Mr. McGregor, and Mr. Barlow. And just before you go, Ms. Taylor-Roy, the legislative clerk has asked just for the ability to add one more element to this discussion before we turn to you.
Very well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Monsieur Perron.
Mr. Perron, to solve the problem that you seem to have, the solution that could be possible would be to adopt CPC1 and CPC2 now, and at the report stage propose an amendment that would modify CPC2 as you suggest. And that's something that could happen. You would have the two right now, and then CPC1 and CPC2, and then at the report stage, you could amend the content of CPC2 if you wished.
Very quickly then, Mr.
Très rapide
Perron,
sous-question. Donc, c'est impossible.
So it's impossible for me to do it now, today?
Non, c'est pas impossible.
No, it's not impossible, but you would have to cut them in half or separately, and then there's the risk that I explained. Well, the risk is today.
Taylor-Roy. Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I understand that these two have to be put in together. So is it possible to make amendments to CPC2 now before voting on CPC1 and then vote on them together? And if so, I have something I'd like to suggest.
So I think the legislative clerk might have addressed, but why don't, if you can, just for everyone's clarity, if you could explain again.
Yeah. If the will of the committee is to separate the two amendments, yes, it would be possible to amend CPC2 later on when the CPC2 is called. Otherwise, it would not be possible because they go together. But it's the will of the committee that matters here. If the will of the committee is to proceed with CPC1 and do whatever they do with CPC1 and then go to CPC2 after that, it's the will of the committee that matters.
Ms. Taylor-Roy, would you have any further comment now that that's been clarified? Or would you like to reserve that until you hear from Mr. McGregor, Mr. Barlow? I can always come back to you.
Well, I'll just state what my concern is with CPC2, and then I don't know if I'm comfortable voting for CPC1, knowing that we have to vote for CPC2 without knowing whether CPC2 will be amended or not. But in any event, my concern with CPC2 is twofold. One is that it allows for an extension of the sunset clause, per se, from the 10th anniversary into something postponing that to a later date, but it doesn't allow for that to be brought forward if, for example, technology is developed and something is available. The second thing is that 10 years, to me, the 10th anniversary is problematic. And I think that in Lib 2, there is the suggestion of 8th anniversary, and even that we perhaps could debate. So I'm still a little unclear. I guess we could vote for CPC 1, but then if CPC 2 isn't amended sufficiently, I'm not sure what happens to the bill.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor-Roy. Mr. McGregor, I know you had your hand up.
Thank you.
Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. I take the clerk's warnings about messing up CPC 2 because of how tied it is to CPC 1. I guess my question is, if the committee does decide to split the two, and I'm only talking about very minor surgery, in CPC 2, if in the third subsection, if we were to remove the words "but may not be amended," that to me doesn't seem like it would have any consequential effect on CPC 1. And I would just ask, Chair, if we could have the clerk's direction on that, because that's not interfering with the substance of CPC 2. It's a very minor change. I just don't want to handcuff future parliamentarians on what they may or may not want to do.
Our amendment, we're fine with that change.
Okay.
If that helps in terms of we would just take that as a friendly change.
So, Mr. McGregor, just so I'm sure, what you're asking of the legislative clerk, while I give him time to contemplate what you've said, is that you're wondering whether or not it is possible to move an amendment of that provision because it doesn't have consequence in a material way to CPC 1.
I was going to add a layer of complexity to the discussion, but I won't. Unanimous consent can solve a number of problems, so that's one of them. I could maybe suggest if you ask unanimous consent to do it that way, you may get it or not, and then I'll add my layer of complexity after the answer to the question.
So I can help with that conversation if you don't mind. Maybe I'll explain what the legislative clerk has explained to me. The other procedural challenge of how best we move forward here is if CPC 1 is adopted and approved, we then go to Lib number 2, which talks, according to the legislative clerk, which we would then study the amendment from Mr. Turnbull. And if for some reason that were to pass, it would then move that CPC 2 would be invalid. So this is the other element. I'll leave it to the expert to speak, but that's what I'm being told.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there was a second layer of complexity. Indeed, if CPC 1 is adopted, and we would move to Lib 2 because it's in the order of the bill, and if Mr. Turnbull were to move Lib 2 without the first part of it, because that's not been dealt with already, we would deal with the sunset clause that would be 8 years. And if the sunset clause is approved by the committee, then the sunset clause is literally closed for debate, so to speak. So you would have an 8 year sunset clause for only one part of the bill, the 2.1. Sorry.
No one suggested parliamentary procedure was straightforward. Ms. Taylor-Roy, I did your hand, but it might have been from the last time, or is this a new hand? New hand. Ms. Taylor-Roy, followed by Mr. Perron.
Ouais. Merci. Je vais me permettre un comment.
Désolé.
Thank you.
Madame Taylor-Roy, après ça, merci.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand if the amendment that Mr. McGregor put forward can be made. The amendments that I was talking about similarly do not affect CPC 1. They're in the same vein of just altering some of the provisions in CPC 2. So I'm confused as to why one amendment could be made, but others couldn't be made.
I'll go to Mr. Perron first, and then I'm going to go to you, Mr. Barlow.
I'm just going to make a comment. I don't understand that CPC 1 and 2 must be voted on together. And if after we vote on CPC 1, we can still go on to Liberal 2, and that at the same time we're voting on CPC 2. There's something that I don't really understand there. And the other point is to find a fast solution, you talked about unanimous consent. I would suggest unanimous consent for removing those 5 words from CPC 2. And then I think we could vote things one after the other, and that would solve the problem.
So I'll go to Mr. Barlow, and then I'll do my best as your chair to explain some of how they're tied. And if I don't get it right, I'm sure the legislative clerk will jump in.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up Mr. Perron. So we have 2 options here how I'm reading it. Unanimous. So we can't, because the amendment's already been tabled, as the Conservatives who tabled that motion or that amendment, we can't just say we'll strike those 5 words and move on. Okay, so I need to be unanimous. So option 2 is then we need unanimous consent to strike those 5 words, and then we can move on. I will agree with Mr. Perron. I'll ask for unanimous consent to remove those 5 words, and hopefully we can move on. We kind of all understand where this is going to go. Let's just get there.
So I will go to that in a moment if there's no other debate. But Mr. Perron, my understanding of how they're connected, as the clerk has explained, is that if you adopt CPC 1 but don't adopt CPC 2, the provisions of the 2 amendments are interconnected. Therefore, you run the risk that if CPC 1 is adopted but CPC 2 is not down the line, then there can be real consequences. And the way in which we are studying these provisions is in between those 2 conservative provisions is the Liberal provision, if adopted, would then have consequences such that CPC 2 couldn't be adopted. That's the procedural element here. But we know what your concern is, which is in the provision of the 5 words in CPC 2. Colleagues, I'll ask for any conversation on whether or not unanimous consent can be achieved. Mr. Turnbull?
Yeah, so in CPC 2 under Section 3, which is I'm speaking to Mr. McGregor's proposed, I guess it would be a sub-amendment, which is removing the 5 words but may not be amended. Does that solve for the fact that this CPC 2 actually still opens up the possibility, as Ms. Taylor-Roy mentioned, of this sunset clause essentially being extended? I don't think it does. It just says that it may not be amended, i.e. the changes that are being made now could then be amended, right? In essence, what I'm trying to clarify is whether Mr. McGregor's proposed sub-amendment by removing those 5 words negates the possibility of 10 years later this from being extended once again. It doesn't deal with that consideration as far as I can tell. So in that respect, I don't know why I would give it my unanimous consent, because I have a deep concern with this being extended and extended and extended. A 10-year sunset clause should be a 10-year sunset clause. I don't feel comfortable with introducing things that can be amended or extended over and over and over again for decades to come.
Okay, I have Ms. Taylor-Roy. I know, Mr. Barlow, you wanted to speak, but I have Ms. Taylor-Roy, Mr. Barlow, Mr. McGregor, Mr. Perro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, in response to Mr. Turnbull's comment, the part that concerned me was in CPC 2, the first paragraph, where it says that it comes into force on the day that is the 10th anniversary of the day on which this act comes into force, unless before that day their coming into force is postponed by a resolution whose text is established under subsection 2 passed by both houses. So it's basically saying that this can be extended again. And I find it very hard to believe that in 10 years we're not going to have a clean tech alternative. So that's what concerned me about that particular paragraph.
Mr. Barlow.
Well, to Mr. Turnbull and Ms. Taylor-Roy, like, that is the whole idea of the sunset clause and the order in council, is that if there is the technology, that this exemption ends, and that those price on pollution carbon tax goes on to natural gas and propane. However, if the technology is not available and the government of the day, whoever that may be, that will be debated in the House. Amendments will now be allowed, thanks to the good eyes of our colleagues, that the government of the day can make changes to this legislation that could massage it into whatever the government of the day wants to be. But that's really the whole idea of this legislation, is to provide that exemption to kind of correct an oversight in the previous price and pollution legislation for the next 10 years that will be reviewed by the government of the day and either repealed and go back to what it is as of right now, or amended or extended. That is kind of the idea, and that's 10 years from now. I certainly hope I'm not still here, and the government of the day will have that choice. So, I'll be leaving in government. Don't get me wrong, but we're not trying to be tricky with this in any way, shape, or form. This is all in good faith, from what we heard from our testimony and certainly from other colleagues. So if we don't have unanimous consent, let's move on, and get this moving. We'll split it up if we need to and vote on them separately.
I hope the people from Foothills were listening. Mr. Barlow does not want to be here in 10 years, but we don't want to wish him well, or no, we don't want to wish against him in the next couple. Mr. McGregor, Mr. Perro.
Yeah, just very quickly, the way this is structured is it's actually giving Parliament more of a role in this process. And you have to note also that it has to pass both houses of Parliament, right? There's also the Senate. And by removing those 5 words, the government of the day can put forward the resolution. And I think by deleting these 5 words, a member of the opposition could say, well, I'm going to actually propose an amendment to how that resolution's worded because I don't like the way it's going. So I think we're actually giving more of a role to members of the opposition here. And the fact that both houses have to pass the same resolution, that's tough at the best of times. I just think that hopefully answers the concerns that you raised.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Barlow. And he's the one amongst us who does not want to be here 10 years from now. It's an interesting political message.
Here, not in opposition.
And so if I come back to the subject, I support Mr. Barlow to divide the clauses and vote on each clause.
Mr. Turnbull?
Just a quick point in response to Mr. Barlow's earlier comments. I think for me, in listening to all the testimony, we heard that for grain drying, there is technology. It's just not commercially adopted at this point. So, I've done research myself. I've found many examples of grain drying technology that's out there. We just haven't adopted it in Canada yet. So my point is just that again, a sunset clause for this is important to me personally. Like, I think having I would prefer it to be a shorter time frame, to be honest. But certainly the one that's proposed here is 10 years. And I think, but once you start talking about the potential for extending that, that's where all the alarm bells in my mind go off. And I don't see it. And to Mr. McGregor's point, I totally get that Parliament in the future can, in many years from now, can have their say, and that's fine. But I mean, I just think we seem to be opening this up to continual extension and deferral. Thanks.
Ms. Taylor-Roy.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Barlow, for explaining your position on this, because I think we agree that within 10 years there should be clean tech that could address this. So if we all agree on that, why not just leave it after, on the force that is the 10th anniversary of the day when it comes into force? Because we know new legislation could be introduced 10 years from now, if the need be, and if there is no clean tech, which would be a surprise to us all, there could be new legislation introduced. So what I don't like is that we're setting it up to put in doubt that something's going to be there and to say that this is going to go longer. So I don't think it's necessary. I mean, your explanation, that it would only be used if there was no clean tech, and we all seem to agree, given testimony, that there will be clean tech. And we know there's a solution if there's not, which new legislation could just be introduced. So I'd rather, do this in great faith in our clean tech industry and our ag industry that we're going to solve this problem. And just to add to that, I actually think it'll be done before 10 years, in particular for barn heating. I believe are grain drying too, so I have an issue with that. But more than that, it's the kind of assumption that it's not going to be available by allowing it to be extended, and with no provision to actually advance it or to have the sunset reduced if, in fact, the clean tech does come into force before the 10 years.
What happens? Mr. Barlow?
It's clearly we don't have unanimous consent, Mr. Chair, for that small change. So I would move a motion that we split CP1 and CP2 and vote on them separately.
Mr. Legislative Clerk, just want to make sure that's within your understanding of what is possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no need of a motion. CPC1 is already on the table. Vote on one. And
well, with that in mind, Mr. Chair, I would call a vote on CPC1.
Any further discussion, colleagues? I see Mr. Turnbull's hand.
So CPC1 as a standalone obviously has the impact that you had mentioned, which is, I think, very clear. So, and then if we vote on CPC1, we still will consider Lib 2. Is that correct? Okay, fair.
I spoke too fast. Yes, Lib 2 would be still possible to be considered, but only the B part, because the A part would already be adopted by CPC1, which they are identical. So you would have to move it without the A part.
So just so you're sure, Mr. Turnbull, obviously if CPC1 passes, your language in the start of your amendment is mirrored. It would be you would move an amended piece, which is the sunset at 8 years. So seeing no other further hands or debate or discussion, I'm going to move. I was going to move to a vote, but let me just talk to my legislative clerk friend. Over to you. Okay, colleagues, I'll ask for a recorded vote from the clerk.
Mr. Kellaway?
Against?
Mr. Louis?
Against.
Ms. Taylor-Roy?
Against.
Mr. Turnbull?
Against.
Ms. Valdez?
Against.
Mr. Barlow?
In favor?
Mr. LaHoo?
En faveur.
Ms. Rood?
In favor?
Mr. Steinley?
Yes.
Monsieur
Monsieur Perron? In favor.
In favor.
Six nays, 6 non, 5 yeas, 5 oui. Six nays. Oh, sorry. I apologize. I apologize. 5 nays, 5 non, 6 oui, 6 yeas. I apologize.
Okay. Yes, no problem, Madam Clerk. Okay, we're now moving to Liberal proposed amendment number 2. I'm going to move first to the legislative clerk to talk about some of the dynamic and the interplay here, and then Mr. Turnbull, I'll move it to you to introduce the rationale and why this amendment makes sense in your mind. Over to you, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first thing, you will need to move your amendment without paragraph A, because that's what just adopted. On paragraph 2, paragraph B, that is, the sunset clause that's provided here, it's only for the paragraph 2.1 that would provide for an 8-year sunset clause. So turning over to CPC 2, there is already a provision for a sunset clause for 2.1 for 10 years. So this would, your amendment, if it were to be adopted, would negate the possibility of having that 2.1 at 10 years. It would be 8 years. The others would be able to be amended any which way, 10 years, 8 years, or... So I just wanted to point that out.
So, for my clarity as the chair and perhaps for all members, my understanding is if Mr. Turnbull's amendment is proposed, it wouldn't completely negate CPC2. It would just negate the aspect around subsection 2.1 of that aspect of what's being proposed. What comes next? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So it wouldn't completely strike the ability to consider CPC2. It would change from 10 years to 8 years, subsection 2.1.
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Turnbull.
Sure, yeah. So I do want to move Lib 2 without paragraph A. Do I need to read it into the record, or you all have it, so it should be fine? Okay, great. Let me give you the rationale. So I think the original bill, C-206, which C-234 is based on, recommended a 10-year exemption. So it's already been 2 years. So it would follow very logically that, okay, another 8 years is rational. Certainly we've heard some testimony that the technology needs to be adopted quicker. I think the government can help with that. I think an 8-year timeline seems to me to be consistent with a lot of the testimony that we heard. There was witnesses that said it's kind of a moving target. They weren't sure whether a long period was needed or a shorter period was needed. We did hear testimony on that. I don't have all of the testimony in front of me right now, but if one wished, I could look it up. But I recollect pretty clearly that there was some different timelines given based on different witnesses and their expert advice. So I'll leave it at that. I think 8 years is better than 10 for those reasons. Thanks.
Okay. I did see Ms. Valdez's hand first, followed by Mr. Steinley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank Mr. Turnbull for his amendment, and I spoke to Ryan briefly. I propose to amend the time from 8 years to 4 years to align with the time where we are completing the interim review of the Pricing Act, which the government has publicly committed to 2026.
Okay. So, colleagues, again, Mr. Turnbull has proposed an amendment. Ms. Valdez is now proposing a sub-amendment to what Mr. Turnbull moved. I'll turn it over to Mr. Steinley for comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just ask that we move to a vote because I think we've covered a lot of this during the last conversation with all three of the amendments talking about. So I think we can move to a vote now and see where we land.
Well, unfortunately, that doesn't rest completely with me because if members do want to continue to have a conversation, the procedural rules say that by and large I need to make that happen. So thank you for the suggestion, Mr. Steinley. Any other comments or questions? Or maybe we might get to do what Mr. Steinley wants. But any other thoughts from colleagues? Okay, well, we do get what Mr. Steinley wants. So, Madam Clerk, if we could, and colleagues, just to be clear, on the sub-amendment, the proposed 4-year timeline for subsection 2.1 as moved by Mr. Turnbull, as amended, as proposed on the sub-amendment from Ms. Valdez. Madam Clerk?
So just to be clear, we're voting on the sub-amendment for Ms. Valdez. Okay. Mr. Kellaway?
In favor.
Mr. Louis?
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy?
In favor.
Mr. Turnbull?
In favor.
Ms. Valdez?
In favor.
Mr. Barlow?
Against.
Mr. Lehoux?
Contre.
Against.
Against.
Mr. Stein?
No.
Monsieur Per?
Monsieur Perron? Against.
Mr. McGregor?
Against.
Six nays, 6 non, 5 yeas, 5 oui.
Okay, colleagues, the proposed sub-amendment is defeated, but now we will vote on the amendment as proposed, which is Mr. Turnbull's suggestion of 8 years for subsection 2.1 as opposed to the 10, I guess, is what we would get to in CPC 2. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Kellaway?
In favor.
Mr. Louis?
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy?
In favor.
Mr. Turnbull?
En favor.
Ms. Valdez?
In favor.
Mr. Barlow?
Against.
Mr. Lehoux?
Contre.
Against.
No.
Mr. Steinley?
Against.
Monsieur
Monsieur Perron? Against.
McGregor?
Against.
Six nays, 6 non, 5 yeas, 5 oui.
Okay, so that amendment is defeated. We'll now turn our focus to the last proposed amendment. Pardon me. Okay. I was a little in haste to go to what is actually essentially a new clause that is being proposed in the amendment. So the clerk will explain to you that we have to see whether or not Clause 1, as amended, carries. So I see Mr. McGregor's look of confusion, me as well, as I heard from our legislative clerk. Essentially, all the amendments to date would impact what's called Clause 1, which is the actual text of the bill. What you're proposing in CPC 2 is an actual brand new clause. So I actually have to ask whether or not you want to accept everything to date on the 4 amendments, and then we will go to CPC 2. Did I get it right, Mr. Legislative Clerk? My law degree came to some use at Dalhousie. Shout out to Dalhousie University. There we go. Oh, look, they're all good. All the universities are good. So unless there's any other comments, I would move that we vote on essentially what we've just done as it relates to clause number 1 of the bill. Yeah, clause 1 as amended. Shall it carry? Would you like to go on division? Would you like a recorded vote? How would you like to do? Do you just want to go on division? Yes, on division. Okay. Carried on division. Okay. Am I now able to proceed, Mr. Legislative Clerk? Okay, now we will go to clause number 2, which of course is CPC 2. Mr. Perron, I do see your hand, but I have to let Mr. McGregor. I don't know if there's much introduction that has to happen on that, so I'm just going to actually let. We've talked at this at great length, so I'll go to Mr. Perron, followed by Mr. McGregor, and any of my other colleagues that might want to jump in.
So, if this is the right time, I would like to make a sub-amendment to eliminate it, but cannot be amended in paragraph 3 of CBC 2. Eliminate that may not be amended.
Okay, we're in order. We're good. But I do see Mr. McGregor's hand, and I'll leave the floor open to anyone else that might want to speak to this proposed clause number 2 or Mr. Perron's sub-amendment of clause number 2.
Chair, I have an amendment, but I can't move it at this time until we deal with Mr. Perron's, because it's dealing with a different section. It's a very minor change, but I think unless anyone else has room to speak, maybe we should just go to a vote on what Mr. Perron's.
Sure. Okay. If that's the will of the committee. Sure. Okay. Madam Clerk, if you'd like to do a registered vote.
Mr. Callaway?
Against?
Mr. Louis?
I'd just like some clarity. I would just I want to make sure what I'm voting on. Mr. Miller, would you just explain one more time, or Chair?
Or we can let the legislative clerk explain. Or we're already in the vote and it's too far down. Let me do my best to explain this to you. I do have a little bit more discretion, perhaps, as the chair. So essentially, Mr. Lewis, what is being proposed on CPC 2 would be a second clause to what we've already adopted to date. So above and beyond C234, this is being proposed to be added as clause number 2. Mr. Barlow has moved that clause. Mr. Perron has moved a sub-amendment to that, which would strike under paragraph 3 the words, but may not be amended. And the conversation, as best as I can reflect it, that we've had today was in relation to the fact that particularly Mr. Perron, Mr. McGregor, and others have wanted to make sure that the hands of future parliamentarians are not tied, and therefore the actual text of a motion introducing this type of conversation to the House could be amended. And that's, at its core, what I believe the intent of this sub-amendment is. Mr. Callaway.
I should probably stick on the Fisheries Committee. So I'm wondering if it's possible then, with that great explanation, and kudos to Dalhousie University for great education you received, I'm wondering if it could, I don't know the process to be able to rescind that vote and to to start again. Can you? You
Our good
guys are
friend
fine.
from
You're
Cape Breton,
good.
Canso.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Callaway, you're doing your best to be a Mr. Drouin. You're up first. Over to you, my friend.
Take two. Yes.
Mr. Louis,
In favor.
Ms. Taylor-Roy,
I vote yes on Mr. Perron's sub-amendment.
Mr. Turnbull,
I vote in favor of the sub-amendment.
Ms. Valdez,
In favor.
Mr. Barlow,
Yes.
Mr. LaHoo,
En faveur.
Ms. Root,
Yes.
Mr. Steinley,
Yes.
Monsieur Perron,
En faveur.
Mr. McGregor.
Yes.
All in favor, tous en faveur.
Okay, great. Colleagues, we'll now proceed to. Mr. McGregor. Sorry, yes, that's right. Mr. McGregor, you wanted to move perhaps another amendment. Over to you.
So with an assurance to Mr. Barlow that I will support the overall CPC2, I move that wherever the word 10th appears, we change that to 8th. So that instead of it's being the 10th anniversary, it's the 8th anniversary. And then later on in subsection 4, when it quotes the day that is the 10th anniversary, change that also to 8th. So it's just really a nod to my Liberal colleagues trying to find a halfway point here. So there's my olive branch.
The bad news then? Options. Okay, there's always options. The legislative clerk is ruling that, or acknowledging to me that might be a problem, Mr. McGregor, but I'll let him explain and if there's any recourse to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With every problem, there's always a solution, as we say. When the committee voted on Lib 2, it voted against an 8 years sunset clause for Section 2.1. Now you can go back and say we want it, so that's the problem. So the solution would be 9 years for all of it. But who am I?
Like to turn your mic on and just explain that?
We're masters of our own destiny.
Basically to rescind the decision that the committee has taken on Lib 2, so to speak, but then by UC doing it to CPC 2.
Monsieur Perron.
Mr. Perron, I don't dare say I don't agree with the clerk, but by my interpretation, but in Liberal 2, for example, the clause was partial. We said no to 8 years in a part of the in a specific clause, but here is the overall law. I think we could have the leeway to propose 8. And if we didn't approve it earlier, we can't put it here.
I don't need to speak for the legislative clerk, but what I've heard is both. We can get unanimous consent to do 8 years. We could do not 8 years. I do take your point, Mr. Perron, that it was specific to 2.1 and not necessarily the rest. But I see Ms. Taylor-Roy's, given the fact I don't want to preclude what might happen next, but I know that there was a desire to reduce from 10 years downwards from my Liberal colleagues. It might be something we can all resolve. Ms. Taylor-Roy, over to you.
Yes, I just had a simple question. The clerk mentioned that it could be 9 years. Can it be any number of years other than 8? Is 8 the only number that's been precluded by Lib 2?
If I may, and if I get it wrong, Mr. Legislative Clerk, my understanding, Ms. Taylor-Roy, is it can be 8 years. so long as we have unanimous consent from this committee, because the procedural element would have been, we did decide on 2.1. I think Mr. Parent raises an important point about the other provisions. I don't know if we have to go there, because I think we can see if we can get UC, but I see Mr. Barlow's hand.
Yeah, and I don't want this to be, we agreed on the 8 years to be part of that larger CPC2. My understanding from the legislative clerk, when Lib 2 was up, we voted against that because that would have negated CPC2, and there were some other elements in CPC2 that we wanted to be there. So it wasn't we're voting against the Liberal one to get the Conservative one. We're fine with the 8 years. So I would hope that we would have unanimous consent to go to 8 years and get this done.
Okay. Is there unanimous consent to essentially, as the clerk had suggested, negate the impact of the 8 years and essentially allow the provision to be struck from 10 years to 8 years as Mr. McGregor is proposing? Okay, so passed. So, Madam Clerk, with your help, we do have unanimous consent. I guess I'll just move a unanimous consent, ask for unanimous consent as it relates to Mr. McGregor's sub-amendment to strike anywhere where it says 10 years, or 10th anniversary, I should be very clear, 10th anniversary to 8th anniversary, correct? Do we have unanimous consent on that provision? Great. Save ourselves a vote. Okay. Now, bringing that back, unless there's any other proposed amendments, any other conversation or hands. Okay, bringing this back then to Mr. McGregor's proposed CPC2 as amended by both the provision from Mr. Parent, striking but may not be amended, and the approved amendment from Mr. McGregor moving anything from 10th anniversary to now say 8th anniversary. I'll call a vote on that specific provision. Madam Clerk, if you could help me. Would you like to do that on division, colleagues? Is that fine?
Fine, yep.
Okay. Carried on division. Great. Now, this turns me to the point where I guess I should look at my notes. Do we have to have a complete vote on both Clause 1 and 2, Mr. Legislative Clerk, or are we done with our work today?
No.
No, we're not done. No, yes, I've turned the page. Yes, this is my first time doing clause by clause, colleagues, so stay with me. So, we've moved CPC, it's carried. So shall the title carry? The title of the bill, Mr. Love's bill. On division, carried. Shall the bill as amended carry?
I'd like that recorded.
Okay, so we've asked for a recorded vote. Madam Clerk, if you can help us.
Mr. Kellaway?
Against?
Mr. Louis?
Against.
Ms. Taylor-Roy?
Against.
Mr. Turnbull?
Against.
Ms. Valdez?
Against.
Mr. Barlow?
Proudly in favor.
Mr. Liu?
En faveur.
Ms. Root?
Absolutely in favor.
Mr. Steinley?
Yes.
Monsieur Perron?
En faveur.
Mr. McGregor?
Yes.
Six yeas, 6 oui, 5 nays, 5 no.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. And shall the chair report the bill as amended to the House? Okay. On division, that's carried. And shall the committee order a reprint of the bill as amended for the use of the House at the report stage? Obviously, pretty standard stuff. Whether on division or unanimous, we'll move that forward. Okay. On division, I guess, for you, Madam Clerk, for your benefit. Anything else that we need to do on your end? Colleagues, we were about an hour and a half. Good discussion. I think it was done the way that it should be done. Appreciate your time. We are going to be moving on the 16th. Our last global food security study. The first hour is going to be witnesses. The second hour is going to be the opportunity to provide some feedback to the analysts in terms of their drafting instructions. We are asking for specific recommendations by November 21st, if I remember correctly, correct? So please come ready to talk about what we have heard since May and June and be able to, of course, have our last panel on that subject. Thank you. I don't have anything else. I know Mr. Lobb is here, so congratulations to you, Mr. Lobb. And we'll go from there. Thank you, colleagues.